Thanks everyone for joining us today for our Tuesday talk. My name is Susie Dunn. I'm the Director of Resale for Right at Home and filling in today for Jen Chaney, who's our Vice President of Franchise Development. And I've got the opportunity to talk to the wonderful Nikki Holles, who's our Vice President of Human Resources, and just a fantastic resource on all things caregiver recruitment and retention on behalf of Right at Home. So certainly a hot topic, and I'm sure that those who are listening, whether they're listening live or listening in the future, are very interested in what you have to say, Nikki.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for hosting.
Absolutely. Before we get started, just a reminder that you are able to ask questions in this format. So there's a Q&A button in the bottom of your screen. Feel free to type in your question there. And if you want to make it anonymous, you can sure do that. If you don't want me to know who's asking the question, that's an option using that Q&A function. So I look forward to questions. I know Nikki does as well. That will help our conversation move along and should make it more valuable for those of you that are listening live. And for those of you that are listening in the future, I hope this answers any questions you might have. So Nikki, here we are, end of March 2023. It's hard to believe the first quarter is almost behind us. And the world is changing really, really quickly, as we know. In the first half of this year, the first 3 months of this year, there's been a lot of layoffs. There's a lot changing in and around employment. Do you mind giving us just an update sort of on what you're seeing with caregiver recruitment and retention currently, end of Q1 2023, specifically with our offices, of course?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I will say is I'm seeing a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to caregiver recruitment, which is probably the best news that we could be looking for at this point in time. So, if we do just a quick journey back, we're looking at 2020, 2021, when the world really went upside down. And we were already entering this phase of caregiver shortage and really how that was going to impact us. And then the pandemic really just created that heightened sense of that this is really happening. And the way that displayed itself to franchisees here in the Right at Home system, I can speak to specifically, like you said, Susie, was just record number lows in terms of applicants applying for positions and really requiring franchisees to get pretty creative in terms of how to get that number back up, right? And really what that looked like was making the application process easier, simpler, quicker, those types of things to just really generate as much traction as possible to work with those applicants. Now, what I will say, you asked about where are we at today, end of quarter one, 2023. The good news is what we are hearing and what we are seeing from franchisees is the number of applicants is continuing to go up almost on a weekly basis. We're seeing not only more applicants, but we're seeing the applicants that are applying be a bit stickier, if you will. So they're not ghosting interviews and they're not ghosting orientations at as high of a level as they had been in the past. So we're seeing that light. There's still a lot of progress to be made and still have to be creative and ensure that we're doing things kind of the right way. But there's a light. So it's coming. It's not a train. And I think we're doing okay.
That is fantastic news. I know music to all of us at corporate's ears and certainly to our franchise owners and any future franchise owners as well.
Absolutely.
Is there anything new that we have added, that the corporate office has added in terms of tools or resources to help our franchisees, or anything we will add in 2023 that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I can talk about a couple of things, Susie. So one of the pieces, and we actually just had an entire franchisee call. We talked about a couple of these things on as well. So we're working here at the corporate office, really across all teams, but our team in particular, working on digital best practices and what that means from a caregiver recruitment and retention standpoint. So really leveraging the offices out there that are seeing high numbers of applicant volume and high success rates on their applicant to hire ratio, as well as their retention rates, seeing high engagement and retention rates, and visiting those offices and really learning from them what they're doing and what's helped them be successful, and then making and creating what they're doing into best practices to allow others to really learn from those franchisees that are finding a lot of success.
Awesome.
So best practices is one of the things. The other piece that I'll talk about is the applicant tracking system integration with lead generation programs. So for example, we're testing a partnership right now with My CNA Jobs. For those of you that have been in the industry for any amount of time, know that they are a huge network that have access to millions of CNAs across the United States. And so by creating a partnership with them to get leads or applicants in and then filtered into that applicant tracking system for ease of tracking and administering for the franchisee is another really exciting new piece that we're working on right now. So that's in the testing phase, but that's also something new that we are working on to continue to help keep that funnel going of applicants into the right at home family.
Awesome. That's great. So we spent the first few minutes here talking about recruitment, which of course is important and top of mind. There are some questions coming in around retention. So can we pivot to talk about retention?
Yeah, please.
Do you have sort of a feel for what is the average caregiver turnover in a right at home office? What does turnover look like?
Yeah. So we actually, Susie, we measure it a little bit differently for the caregivers, and we actually measure retention versus turnover. And the reason we do that is because there is a natural turnover to the caregiver role, because it is a lot of students, maybe nursing students, who are working in this role until they get their nursing license, as an example. And so there's always going to be some of that natural turnover in this role. So we felt like it would be better to measure retention. And really what that looks at is, are those folks that are able to stay, are they staying with us, or are they choosing to go to work as a caregiver with another agency? So as we look at that, the industry average for retention right now across all companies is just right hovering at that 85% mark, 85% retention. We currently in the right at home system, we're seeing just above that industry benchmark just last week, we reported on it as 86.16. So we're just a notch above industry average. And we're continuing to tick up a little bit kind of every time we look at it. And what that tells me, again, is we go back to franchisees and business owners are recognizing the importance of that retention because of the caregiver shortage. So creating those engagement programs, really listening to the caregivers, what's important to them, providing that paid training, providing the paid orientation, those pieces that really speak to caregivers and allow them to flourish in their career with right at home. We have seen that impact those retention rates as we continue to edge out what the industry is showing right now.
Awesome. There's a related question from an attendee. How does employee retention work if I'm buying an existing right at home? How is that relationship handled? And I know you've got a little bit of experience with that. So do you mind talking about employee retention in a resale type situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really glad this question came up, because it is so important as we think about how do we integration, meaning going from being a business owner or I should say as an employee. If I go from being an employee of one business owner to now being an employee of another business owner, it may feel like, somebody who's maybe a little bit above the weeds might feel like, well, they're going to keep doing the same job, so it's okay. It's not that big of a deal. We don't really need to worry because their day to day isn't really going to change. And I think it's such a good lens to look at through the caregiver's eyes, and knowing how that caregiver reacts to change and how a caregiver reacts to change is probably the best way to put it, but something even their paycheck looking a little different on who the bank is that it's coming from, or what it looks like. And so just really engaging them and communicating with them throughout that process, and recognizing that change creates stress for the caregiver, even if they continue to be right at home, even if they continue to be working with the same clients maybe that they've been working with. There will be a culture shift, because there always is when there's a change of ownership. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you don't communicate that and educate the caregivers, they're not going to know that it's not a bad thing. So it's really important to create your marketing and your communication efforts, not just towards office employees or towards your investors, but also towards that caregiver population, to put them at ease and allow them to maintain a sense of control in their role.
Absolutely. And we have more owners looking at resales all the time. And certainly plenty of folks who are viewing this video would be considering purchasing an existing business. So thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to clarify, a question came in. The individual wants to know, for clarity, do caregivers work for corporate or for the franchisee?
Yeah, they work for the franchisee. Very short answer. We at the corporate office do not maintain any records on any caregivers or office staff of the franchisee. So the franchisee is the sole decision maker, hiring manager, and payroll company for all employees within that entity.
Awesome. Yeah, really important question.
Yes,
and really important clarification to draw on. Nikki, one of the things that I'm aware of that we do from a retention standpoint is a wonderful program we call Caregiver of the Year.
Yeah.
And this is a really exciting time, because we are getting ready at our annual meeting near the end of April to award an outstanding caregiver in our system that Caregiver of the Year award. Can you talk about the value of that program for franchise owners and how they can use it for retention and how it benefits them?
Yeah, so glad you asked about this. This is one of those programs that I wish every employee everywhere could really see some of the back end stuff that goes on as part of this program, because it is so meaningful to the caregivers who are even nominated. It's not a cliche for a caregiver to say, it's just to be even thought of and nominated for this award is so meaningful to the caregiver. And when you have something that's meaningful to a caregiver in that sense, they really are your walking billboards. They are your walking ambassadors in your community. And when they feel like they've been recognized for what just comes natural to them as who they are as a human being, compassionate, empathetic, hardworking, dedicated, those are all pieces that a natural caregiver, good caregiver, is really gonna take pride in those things. And it's often such a underserved and recognized occupation. Yes. So just that in and of itself, and what you get as a franchisee by even just nominating. But then when you've got a winner in the mix, and we do regional winners as well as a national winner. So we actually have a handful of different winners throughout our system. There's cash rewards, there's marketing collateral, videos, assets that are provided as part of this program back to the franchisees of these winners to use in their social media or on their websites or what have you. And just really, like I said, that recognition. And then you're able, of course, to create some press releases around all of this as well in the local community, displaying the type of caregivers that you hire and winning national recognition as part of that. So it's a win-win-win. Clients see it, recognize it, the community sees it, and the caregiver. We've had some caregiver winners, Susie, sorry, just one more minute.
No, this is great.
We actually just went out and the national winner has been selected. It'll be announced in April at our conference. But she was so excited that she invited mom and dad out to the dinner, some friends, some siblings, the tears that flowed. And this is something that may feel relatively simple for some folks who, you know, are giving the awards. But to that caregiver, and year in and year out, this is the response we see. It is so meaningful to them and their peers. And the celebrations are just, there's never a dry eye in the house. It's just such an amazing thing.
I love it. And we keep our system in suspense until our annual meeting. And there's just a very small handful of folks who know who the Caregiver of the Year award winner is. So that really builds the suspense and excitement for that award. And just to clarify, somebody asked, every office can participate in this program.
Absolutely. Great. Yes. Yep. Awesome. Every office can and should and welcomed.
Yeah, let's do it. Absolutely.
Yep.
All right. Let's see here. I'm looking at my list of questions. Oh, here's a good one. Would my caregivers work exclusively for me, or would they work potentially for competitors? That's a good question.
Yeah, it is. So it's very, very common in the caregiver world. We also call them, you know, by industry name, they can sometimes be referred to as direct care workers. So you may see that acronym DCW around from time to time. And that refers to folks who work in any capacity as a caregiver, whether that be for a hospital, a facility, a home care agency, any of the above. A vast majority of caregivers or direct care workers have multiple employers. Mm-hmm. And here's the reason for that. The reason, there's a money factor. They're trying to pay the bills. The other reason, in particular in home care, because there's such a connection between a caregiver and a client, that in our field, oftentimes we have to deal with death more often than we would choose to of a client. And when that happens, there may have been a primary caregiver for that client. And obviously their hours then are going to go down until you can get that back up with the right client caregiver fit match. And so when that's happening, there's oftentimes, they know that can fluctuate. So they have different employers that they're working with to maintain their income. So it's very common for caregivers to have multiple employers just for that reason.
Great. So this is kind of a related question. This person says, why do we have corporate-owned locations, and do those locations compete against me for caregivers?
Yeah, so great, both really good questions. So we have company-owned or corporate-owned locations for a few reasons. One is because we believe it helps us be a better franchisor, because we're experiencing the same trials and tribulations that franchisees are. So it helps us not only say, hey, here's what I would do, but we could say, here's what we do, in fact, do, and how we tackle this, because we're living it and breathing it every day alongside the franchisee. We also have company owned for the sake of test kitchens. So there may be times when there's a new partnership or a new program that we want to test. We're not certain that it's going to be successful. And so we don't want to put a lot of time constraints or additional things that a franchisee has to do, not knowing if it's truly going to be a successful program. So we create test kitchens out of some of those locations. And then the last question, do we compete with franchisees? No, we do not compete. So we have, as folks are aware, in a franchise system, we have territories. And each of the territories, a company-owned location will never be in the same territory as a franchisee. So we have those, I'll call it a non-compete. I know that's not the right word for it, but we will not compete against our own franchisees in a territory. That being said, I do want to speak specifically to the caregiver question part of that, because folks can apply for jobs regardless of where they live. So there are laws in the United States that prohibit folks from not advertising in different areas. And so caregivers, generally speaking, will apply to jobs that are closest to them. And if their grandmother may live in a certain part of town and they want to work in that part of town, they have that freedom to apply with somebody who's a franchisee in a different territory where her grandmother may live, as an example. But there isn't anything that says that person can't be an employee of both. So, but every office is able to market and advertise for employees that are designed to meet their needs as a business.
Awesome. I love what you said about, the benefit of company-owned locations is the real world. Hey, we're doing this. We're not just thinking you can do these things in theory. We're actually doing them, and here's how they are or are not working for us. So the person that asked that question, thanks for asking it. It's super important to understand why Right at Home is doing that. Okay, so I'm starting to get some questions in here about benefits, and realizing that each franchise office is independently owned and their decision to offer benefits is their decision and at their expense, since Right at Home is not employing these caregivers. But question, do you know of any owners offering healthcare benefits to employees?
Yeah, we do. So we have right now, and Susie, you may know better than I do, but we have approximately 300 unique franchise owners right now. And of that 300, I would say it's not a majority, but there's definitely a lot who offer some type of medical benefit, whether that be kind of base, ACA, that Affordable Care Act eligible type of coverage and benefit. And then some of the larger franchisees, larger in terms of revenue size, will offer a bit more in terms of medical and pay a bit more towards their premiums. Obviously, all of those things come with a price tag, and so as the entity grows, the business grows, and revenue, you're able to offer a bit more of those things. But yes, short answer is we have a lot of franchisees who offer some type of benefit to employees. Generally speaking, at least office staff, and then some of them are offering to caregivers as well. But a lot of caregivers, remember, will work a varied schedule, so they may not actually be eligible under the criteria for benefits. And there's folks that can help you with that. And I will say, Susie, I apologize, just one more thing. We do have some preferred vendor relationships with benefit brokers who are able to help our franchisees. And these benefit brokers, because they're preferred vendors, will have other Right at Home clients or franchisees as clients. So they can provide kind of that scope of, hey, here's what I know some of these folks do in this area. Here's what some of our clients are doing in that area, to help the franchisee make some of those decisions. So having that preferred vendor status relationship helps quite a bit.
Yeah, that's great. Similar question. Some companies are offering childcare. Are there any franchise owners currently offering any kind of childcare benefit, or Are you aware of anything in the industry along those lines?
Yeah. So what I'm going to say might surprise you. So there, yes, again, short answer, we're seeing a lot of different unique benefits. Childcare reimbursement or subsidies is one of them. We had a few franchisees reach out in consideration of opening their own childcare to help with this effort. And then quickly realize the regulations around childcare is actually a bit more stringent than it is around home care. And the insurance rates go up pretty drastically as well. But so that didn't really work. So a lot of subsidies or reimbursements are happening. But the part that will surprise you, I think, is the average age of a caregiver. The average age of a caregiver across the industry, but it also matches right at home, is in the mid to upper 40s. And by the time you've got a caregiver in the mid to upper 40s, a lot of times they're not dealing with all of the childcare issues. Some of them are, yes. But as we look at the average age of a caregiver, that's not the prime market for childcare issues.
Good to know. There is actually a question in here about are caregivers typically a similar demographic, or do we see them across all ages and all walks of life? And it sounds like it's the latter.
We see them across all ages and walks of life for sure, but you would be amazed at the number of caregivers that are actually older than the people who they are providing care for. So we have caregivers in their 60s and 70s. I mean, it's one of our Caregiver of the Year recipients was in her 70s driving through mountains to get to her client every day. And so it's quite remarkable, really. The sheer scope of age of
everything from nursing students to retirees.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And working at corporate, I know that your team has done an awesome job developing tools for sort of every not every bucket, but we have a set of tools or tactics you could use around nursing students, or a set of tools and tactics you could use around recruiting seniors, for example. And your team has done a wonderful job building out those resources and really helping our franchise owners who might need a different perspective on how they approach those audiences. So
I appreciate you saying that, but it's a team effort, and marketing has been really great to work with too. And then we've got a lot of partners in the industry with a lot of research and statistics that we're able to lean on to really create some wonderful best practices and guides for our franchisees.
Awesome. Well, Nikki, it's been a half an hour. Time flies when you are having fun. We appreciate this. And of course, we look forward to having you back in the future, maybe at the end of Q2, just to see how things have been changing with caregivers and, both getting them in the door and keeping them working for right at home. But we so appreciate you, and we appreciate everyone who spent the time today on the call. We know, everybody's busy, so thanks for taking the time. And we will get back together 2 weeks from today. So on April 4th, the next Tuesday talk will be with Margaret, Tuesday the 4th at 2 p.m. Central. And you'll get to talk with an opportunity to talk with our CEO. So come back then, and we look forward to talking to you all soon. Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.